Welcome to Soulstrong, where we find strength in stories, joy in connection, and purpose in every moment. Each episode channels the curiosity, the depth, the versatility of a modern Renaissance man. I am your host, Justin Fair, blending diverse passions and lived experiences into stories and conversations that reflect a curious life, fully engaged. Today, I am thrilled to share with you a conversation with Michaela Emily Howells, an inspiring thinker, advocate, anthropologist, new co-author of the book Reframing the American Dream: Tiny Houses as a Window into Consumer Culture, Political Landscapes, and Structural Equity. I am honored to be a co-author of one of its chapters, entitled Gaps Between Houses, Gaps in Equity: Tiny Houses and the Housing Crisis in Black Baltimore. Now, this chapter integrates elements of my thesis research, Tiny Houses and the Black Experience in Baltimore, spring 2020. It was an ethnographic planning study that's gaining recognition for its exploration of unconventional housing forms. Now, if you know me and you know how much I talk about tiny homes, this project, this investigation, this initiative, this lifestyle has been an incredible journey for me. And so I am so proud to represent Baltimore in this vital conversation. I want to take a moment to acknowledge the mentors and advisors who shaped this work: Dr. Daniel Campo, Lisa Hodges-Hinken, Louise Zaretta. Your guidance and support have been invaluable to me. Now, before we dive into my conversation with Michaela, let me share with you some exciting updates and activities that complement this chapter's work. First, the book is for sale. It will be coming to stores February 1st, available in print and in ebook for $50 on the Rowman and Littlefield Publishers website, and of course on Amazon. This spring, please join me for 3, maybe 4 opportunities to come engage and check out tiny houses yourself. First, let me say that I'm getting a book reading roundtable together. That's right, I'm hoping maybe this April, May, June, we can have a community gathering of the Maryland Tiny House Coalition. Together we can discuss the book, brainstorm solutions for advancing equity in housing here in Maryland. Second, I want to say that there is a Hope Village group tour that I'm hoping to get together. Hope Village is a pocket neighborhood of 13 efficient homes designed to help working people transition from homelessness. It is in Oliver. If you have not been by there, it is an amazing pocket neighborhood. The homes look great, and they are serving people. And I'm so grateful to the amazing work that the Heart Place Services team does. It's fantastic. Third, let me say that I'm hoping we can all go as a group to the open house for tinyhousecontainer.com. Roger and his team lead this amazing set of demo homes that are being put on display. It's over on the Eastern Shore, right outside of Ridgely, Maryland. These are shipping containers, as the name says, and they are just really cool, efficient houses. Fourth, I want to say that Smaltimore Homes here in Baltimore will be holding workshops and continue for their micro shelters and continuing their tiny home on wheels open house. Hoping this spring, maybe summer. I will have to get back to you. So all this said, I couldn't be more excited to continue advocating for equitable housing solutions here in Maryland. And I can't wait to share with you this conversation with Michaela Emily Howells. Let's get started. Here's our discussion on reframing the American dream.
Yeah. You asked me outside of our book, outside of our chapter, what other stories captivated me. I'll say that one of the other chapters I was brought in on was the one on environmentalism and environmental benefits of tiny housing. And I really was struck because the person whose work I was working with, it was a very similar situation to yours, where she'd done this extraordinary work as part of her PhD. And then as she went into a professional position, like, she didn't have the time to modify it, but she was like, if someone else wants to help with it, cool. And so it was great because I had her whole breadth of work, but it was and working into a chapter form. And I learned so much. I'm already someone who's like aware of environmental impacts. That's something that there's a background that I have in that, in general, but not necessarily in terms of specifically in terms of housing or the footprint. She talks a lot about the environmental footprint. And I really learned so much from that and trying to convey that and engage with that. But I have to tell you that this is, maybe this has come off across my emails before, but it's like, it's a very, very genuine statement. I thought your thesis was so interesting and so well done. And I'm someone who spends a lot of time in people's theses, right? Because I'm a professor, and that I thought it was so interesting. And the work you did was so well done. And I thought that your writing was just really powerful, right? Like, it was really evocative, and it was very, I felt a connection with a place that I've never been to Baltimore, right? And
come on down.
You what now?
Come on down.
Baby. I got things to talk to you about that. But I've never been to Baltimore. I have a general understanding of Baltimore, especially historically and in terms of some of the housing components, right? Because I'm a race scholar as one of my specialties, but you made me feel like I was in that place. I felt a connection with that place. And I tell people that, like, working on that chapter, like, I learned so much, and I felt like I grew in terms of my baseline knowledge. But then also, like, I felt like a connection with Baltimore. And that's what great ethnography is, right? It's like, great ethnography is you pick up something and you're like, I know nothing about this place and I don't care about it. And it's not that I don't care about it. It's not that I didn't know anything, because I would never have agreed to work on something that I didn't have that I didn't care about. But it's like, you get it, and then you're immersed in this world, and then you're like, oh my God, I want to know what's next. And I want to know, like, we didn't have time to do it for this because the turnaround was so short. Because when I was brought on, it was kind of last minute. And by kind of, I mean a lot last minute. But I wish we had had an opportunity to talk about what's going on now, and what, like, when you just said that your recommendations have been uptaken in these ways, or these things have moved forward. Like, and so I just got to think about what space, what space that can be conveyed or brought forward. But I've told people, and I'm telling you, that this is one of my favorite pieces I've ever worked on. And that says a lot, because I have lots of projects, lots of things. And this one just struck me in some way. I'm so proud of this chapter. So thank you for letting me work within your brain and work with your writing and be part of this.
One of the things I really loved about doing my thesis, Michaela, was that it let me share, yes, I had to do the intro, broad strokes of what Baltimore, developed as, broad strokes over, my childhood and over my, I guess, the decade or two preceding me. And sort of the negative, like, there was a point where I was reviewing old video footage about the projects, and people saying, like, I loved my place, it just wasn't maintained, and so of course it got demolished. And I grew up as a kid, like, going past these places, and then they all got demolished.
Yep.
And the result is we all just sort of got used to it and said, oh well, so much for all that.
Mm-hmm.
And Baltimore's a city of row homes, so it really, I wish in some ways, like, it has shown me that it's really about sharing why people like living where they live.
Yes.
And the fact that, like, obviously we like the row house culture, or we wouldn't live here. But also, so many people moved out to the suburbs across all the major American cities, and that didn't stop here.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing I was appreciative about was that I had in my, in the thesis, you have to have these case studies. And in my case, I was reviewing these other papers and books and trying to weave together this connection of um, why people think the way they think. And I was really glad that I was then able to talk about and revise the late Mary Ellen Hayward's book on alley homes. And
Yes.
like there are so many people in the Baltimore region who are doing really cool stuff. And I felt like, oh, I could see this is a thing I might do in my future. I can be like Michaela and teach and maybe review the amazing work of really cool researchers and people doing cool stuff like Saperstein and Hope Village and Baltimore Homes. Like, I'm glad to hear how much you got a joy of learning a bit about Baltimore through that. Because part of what I wanted to do with this work was highlight that, like, if we dream and we vision, then yeah, you can do more with what we've currently got. And I will say that was one of my, I learned through, I'm just browsing through it now as we're talking, Gardner and Moody's work on ancestry and the importance of a house and what it means to you.
Yes.
I wish if I had had my own wider window of research time other than trying to cram it into right at the beginning of COVID.
Oh my God, I know. That's one of
Right.
my things. I'm like, the quality of your work from right
Right.
before COVID.
Well, like I look back at the, I'm looking at my chapter.
Oh, sorry, my watch was talking. Go ahead.
I look back at my chapter and my findings and my analysis, and like it was through me being, I don't know how I managed to get so many people to respond and be so verbally forward, and then like the fact that I was able to take it and make these recommendations.
Right.
And I will say I've heard other people talk about like the front stoop, making sure you have a porch on something. But to be able to say to people like, well, don't, like, I'm glad that my work product is now citable.
Yes.
That I am around advocating, and that's not just me. Like there are other people around. But like now Baltimore is considering more ways, well, not Baltimore specific. I guess you could say it, but they're not pushing it. But the idea of accessory dwelling units, Maryland as a whole is coming up with recommendations to encourage that to move forward.
Interesting.
It's just not, everything requires time and deliberation. But to hear,
oh, go ahead.
Just hear that, it is part. My whole shtick as a graduate student was learning to say to people, we have to have a broad toolkit of options. And the challenge is that usually tiny homes, any house that a bank doesn't make enough money off of, they don't want to sell a mortgage for, especially when in the city, any city, but especially Baltimore as an aged city, you don't know the quality of the water connection. I just got a notice in the mail saying my connection to my water main might have lead in it. How many homes do you want? What, I have to get a reverse osmosis thing? No. And so anyway, not to get too far off topic, it shows me that like I'm really glad that not only was I able to develop these recommendations from those surveys, but I now know that there is a hunger by other people working in this field to explore cooperative housing, to explore, what does it mean to have shared equity, even if there isn't maybe a co-op, central common space. Even here, my department here at Maryland HCD is beginning to have those discussions in-house. Awesome. And I'm really glad because, an administration ago,
right.
that it was seen as like, look, you got to have capital or we're not going to start.
Exactly.
Sorry, so you were about to say something.
No, I'm just so enlivened by what you're saying, and I agree so wholeheartedly. It's just, it is an unfortunate reality that people who are standing in the place of change and in a vision, and you know, you can call it like dreams, but like that there's, and like especially, and I would say like the people who actually know what's needed on the ground, like there tends to be a, well, I don't have like a, like, you know, it's so easy for them to say, well, this isn't a thesis, so I don't. But when it's like that, it's your thesis in a book, it's like, oh, well, this is like, somehow this is, well, we know why, right? Because the idea of like false barriers and boundaries and ivory towers and such, right? But it is so powerful to have something that is written, and that it's something that we can say, okay, you know, like as you're moving through, I mean, there'll be a point where the book is out, and what they're probably going to say is, you know, you can't share any piece of this without prior knowledge, whatever. Share it everywhere. We will figure out a way to get a really high level copy of it electronically, and make sure that you have a chapter like that is shareable, PDFable, because that's, and for me, that's what everything I do is, it's really important to me that I can do that. That it's like, I want it to go to the people who are part of it, need to read it, are, you know, you and I both know most people, you hand it to them higher up, they're not going to read it, but but because there's like that evidence there, they're like, okay, that helps.
Well, at least it's a thing. Like there's a bit of ethos, the ethical appeal to say to someone, well, look, somebody wrote an entire thing on this. And this thing is, in my case, I sort of went above and beyond the call to duty. Oh, yeah. My advisor at school said, you could turn this into a published book if you want. Yeah. And I'm like, it's 2024. It's now been 4 years, I guess, since I graduated. And the idea that I will have more energy to revisit this and turn it into a book, like, well, I still live here and I work here, and it's not, you know, I work by day in the rural counties program, small towns, rural counties. So I've seen examples of how these principles are so easily adoptable elsewhere. But you are very right. You know, people need to see that something has been studied so that they can study. And I will also say one thing I'm realizing I sort of undervalued when I was doing the writing. And when I was pulling, you know, so many wonderful people's words together, is that, you know, in dream, a lot of people spoke about their dream of why they want a tiny home, because they just want something that's manageable. Like this book that you're writing, I think, on the American Dream, I think encapsulates housing, why people want to live in beautiful, nice homes. But also identifies that, like, we aren't all satisfied with the conditions around us. And we're used to what we're used to. But, like, I think for me, it's dreaming. Like, if you don't have a great vision, we're not going to get anywhere by just complaining. You have to think about what you want 100%. And where to go. And I just want to also add, even though most, you know, a lot of people enjoy tiny homes because of the sensational appeal of being on wheels or being out in nature, you know, what would be the most realistic here in Maryland will only be foundation-based homes. But there are villages already popping up out of the woodwork. And I think that, you know, people want to live in cute pocket neighborhoods like Hope Village. People want to live. I would love to go. I'm going to go get a rental vacation at Blue Moon Rising up in Deep Creek. Like there are so, I'm going to look up while we're chatting. There's a, over in the southeast, right underneath the Maryland line into Virginia, Cape Charles, Tiny Living.
Wow.
I'll put the link in the chat.
It just makes so much sense.
It just makes so much sense. But also here in Maryland, because, you know, Maryland's a liberal state as a whole, but like most places, the cities are blue and the rural areas end up being red, often because people need to, you know, people love to be around like minds. You know, we naturally self-segregate, and that's fine.
Right.
The the trouble is when people don't know what equity means and they are afraid to embrace inclusion.
Right.
And the trouble is that you just don't realize, like, oh, if you just travel to other countries and you're going to be moving to the great state of Oregon, like, did I tell you I honeymooned in Portland?
Oh no! Yeah, no,
no.
I'm actually sorry. I'm moving to Colorado.
Oh, Colorado.
But I'm from the Northwest. I'm from the
That's
Seattle
what I'm
area.
remembering.
Yeah, I'm from rural Washington State, which used to be 40 minutes outside of Seattle, and now it's like suburban. Okay, that's the connection, though. Yeah,
that's the connection.
But yay! Oh, you know what you're thinking?
What?
I wonder, is it because Shawn reached out about the conference?
Yes, that's what I'm thinking.
That's what you're thinking. Yep. Which I'm bummed that that doesn't work, and I wish we had money to like bring them out. But we need to do something with it.
My director at work said to consider it, and that it's possible. You know, she said don't poo-poo the idea. So I need to revisit that topic because I think it could be a fun expedition to get away.
Okay. And if there's anything that we can do to help with that, if there's anything that you want us to like write up, anything you want us to pass on, let us know. The period of time for like, I mean, you can always register, but to be like on the agenda, that's closed. But I think because these are the applied anthropology meetings, it's all about community collaborators and that, right? And how do we collaborate? I think that, you know, I would work like hellfire to make sure that you are definitely in that, you know, posted as a collaborator, as someone who is speaking to this, and that you'd be in that agenda.
Okay, I'm gonna email you then after this. Because my work also, we just created a new division called Just Communities.
Oh.
I have the baseline report in front of me, and I will send it to you. And I've learned that, you know, part of this is reporting back on what it really means to identify from an ethnographic perspective what is not being recorded and mapped.
Yes.
And I think the hard part is that even I get so used to assuming I know what's around. And this has revealed to me that no, you go where you're used to going.
Yeah.
And that's a huge difference than understanding, like, what if we really, you know, like I'm always saying, I went to the Caribbean last week or so, right before the holiday.
Nice, good for you.
My husband and I, and we said we want to go to, we said that we want to go to the to Thailand next, and part of me wants to go like to the Malaysian airport, and like I know I can't travel everywhere.
Right.
I also want to go to Japan. I can't do all of it.
You should have been an anthropologist, man. That's how you get around.
But it has shown me that what is so wonderful is that there are entire like biohabitat areas, like places that are becoming biophilic, places that understand how to incorporate animals. Like, and all these things do not happen if you don't see it. So if you don't see it, you don't dream of it, and then you get so used to not seeing it. And it just reminds me how cool that can be. Because also I will say, you know, like, I've learned that it's the visionaries who make other people get excited. And I guess I always assumed before that you just had to just be, you know, ignore other people to just push forward. But no, like it takes a village, it takes everybody to envision something.
Yep.
Because you're not going to magically have capital out of the wazoo.
Nope.
And frankly, you know, models. I reached out to Christian Wilson at Hope's Place, Hope Village, Hearts Place Services, and I said, hey, like, this is really great. Send a small donation. Like, said, like, this is fantastic.
Mhm.
Like, when the press junket blows over, let me come over and get some people, and we can, take a look, walk
Yes.
down the street and get coffee. He said, like how no one had believed in this until it was here. And then people, even at my office, said, "Oh, Justin, I see what you've been talking about." And I'm like, how
Yeah.
awesome that I get to promote other people doing cool stuff. Sorry, I'm just talking your head off now.
No, I'm taking like, dude, I am taking notes upon notes.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
I mean, I'm absolutely like here for this. Yeah, all these things are true, and it's like until it's people are so like day to day what's right in front of them, and it's so hard to capture people's imaginations or recognize like this could be a small risk, but it's also a huge benefit, especially in populations that have, historically and contemporarily are pushed aside, or, people who don't have a lot of capital to work from. They're not the people lobbying governments for these things. So it is extraordinarily powerful to be able to be in a space of change. I mean, Baltimore is a city of change, like in so many different ways,
yeah.
right? But you guys are leaders in these things, and I'm not surprised this is where this is taking off, but I am so delighted, and it's exciting. It's very, very exciting.
I will say, when I was reading your manuscript of the chapter on my work, like, I couldn't get over how it revealed to me that there is a readiness in the city now, but at the start of COVID, there wasn't, but it, in that regard.
Yep.
And my survey window for my thesis was right. I remember it, like Christmas. I heard about the one case in Wuhan,
Mm-hmm.
and I knew back when that I had to get my listening sessions done. I said first
Yep.
week of February, before contamination
So smart.
takes over,
So
before
smart.
we get contagion everywhere. And I hated that I knew at like New Year's that like I had to get this in, because I said, like, people, we are all connected, unfortunately.
Yep.
And the irony is that, like, COVID is just the latest horrible disease. Like,
Yep.
Ebola is still ravaging a huge amount of African countries.
Yep.
And I just watched a video the other day um, on on why the African continent as a whole, in its humongousness of like 3 continental USs can fit into,
Mm-hmm.
why the inbound states have so many issues. And it's because topography wise, they're literally, I think, higher than the edges of the country.
Mm.
And then not so much of the coasts of the entire African continent um, do not have any inland areas to dock.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why there's very few bays. Like
Mm.
here at the Chesapeake Bay,
Yeah.
we have like I think they said like 60% of the bay's length is
Mm-hmm.
actually that. Like all the bay's length is 60% of the eastbound or westbound section of Africa. Like if you take it and unfold it, like they were saying, like, because
That is
already,
so interesting.
they were saying, like, like that's why it's so valuable to have these dockable areas, because otherwise you can't have great travel routes. It's hard when all of your rivers are inland and they are not navigable by sea without, sort of like South America in the Amazon. Like when you have these entire rivers that all you can't easily trade through because they are dangerous and they
Right.
drop in elevation, and it's hard to build rail systems, like, and you've got colonization's impacts to this day.
Absolutely.
Like,
I was going to say.
I was just loving this video because it just reminded me that, like, unfortunately, we only know what we experience.
Right.
We don't get to see that, actually, like, you don't see how many people died from Ebola.
Nope.
We didn't see how many people died from Rwanda's genocide.
Yep.
Despite the fact that it happened within our lifetime.
Yes.
And the video highlights that it's because so much of that devastation happened in an area that wasn't easily navigable.
Mm-hmm.
It's inland villages that other people don't have to visit because they are not major capitals.
Right.
And it just blew my mind. And I love that. I'll send this to you. Real Life Lore is the channel. I'll send this to you.
I was going to say, please send that to me, because that sounds like the perfect thing, one, for me to watch, but also that's the kind of thing I love assigning to my students, because I want them to think about these different components. And we certainly talk about the colonization and colonialization of space, and that, like, borders are drawn, it's the saying where, like, borders are drawn with a ruler and a pencil, right? In Africa. Yeah. And it's negotiations between Europeans about where those boundaries are. And it's not based off the actual people or the language groups or the cultural groups. It's based off of division of resources by other people. So that component with the coastline is also really powerful to think about.
It also reminded me of how many people have passed away over the generations, but especially over our lived generation. Like, when we talk about a growing population and what it means for our country, but also the entire world, growing in population, we shouldn't. The fact that the UN and I know there's a Pan-African government. What's that called? Their version of the UN.
Right. Pan-African Alliance, is it?
Yeah, there's so many things. Yeah. Pan-African movement, right? Well, the institutional model of why it's so freaking large.
Yeah.
And so no wonder people migrate away over generations.
Right.
Because it's a huge, and if you compared that with Asia, it's not a lot of countries there. Why? Because it's so freaking large. Mm-hmm. And when there is call for there to be a separate country, like for the weaker population,
mm-hmm.
It's like, well, you fall within the continental China borders. So it just reminds me that, like, this type of stuff isn't in isolation,
mm-hmm.
but also that, like, when we talk about where we're going to travel to, when we talk about where we want people to consider living, like, it's really cool to take a geography class.
Yep.
And like, I wish I had taken a geography class in college, but this is what YouTube is for now.
I will say, unfortunately, a large portion of being graduated out of graduate school is being like, damn it, why didn't I take a class in fill in the blank? And why didn't I do this thing? And I wish I knew about this thing. I was half joked that I think the university should provide sabbaticals, not like, they should have them for the research, but they should have them for, like, okay, what class do you wish you took when you're in grad school that you didn't take, and go take it now. We'll buy you out of that class you're teaching so you can go learn. I'm like, I need to retake chemistry. I cannot believe how much chemistry I use in my daily life. Or like you're saying, like a geography or like history. I've never taken a history class in college. And I'm like, and so it's all self-taught, which is part of the reason we go to grad school, right? Part of the reason we go to grad school is and it's the biggest part is learn how to learn how to engage with these bigger questions. And I value that, but I'm also like, oh, please just tell me things so I can, I want to know it and do it in an orderly way. It is one of the things, about our chapter is I'm working on how I can use it in my classrooms. As I'm changing jobs, I have a different, I'll be teaching different classes than I was teaching before. So I had a class that this would be perfect in, and now I'm not going to be teaching that. And I'm like, oh, but I want to get it out to a bunch of different faculty who work in a broad level of fields, because there's so much crossover and power in this chapter. I think in the book as well, but in this chapter. And I'm excited for that. One of the things I wanted to share with you is that there's a conference in Baltimore in April that I didn't sign up for it because I didn't actually have money to go to it until I got this new job. Now I have money. So I don't know that I'll be presenting at it, but I'm thinking about going out there. And what I was kicking around, kind of like you, I'm an ideas person of like how things go together. So they wanted to put in your ear and it something doesn't have to be on this visit out there. But one, at the baseline, I would love to be able to connect with you and have coffee, dinner, drinks, whatever is right for you in your life at that time. Whatever, and hearing your, hearing where you are medically on things. I don't say this in any sort of like weird sexual thing at all, but I'm happy to lay on couches and talk to each other and lounge in it. You know what I mean? Like I have friends with chronic fatigue syndrome, and they are like, yes, come over. I'll lay on one couch. You can lay on the other. We could talk,
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I would like that. I have learned that, you have good periods, and then you have so adjustment periods is what the term is. Or spoon theory is another way of describing it.
Yes.
Your energy envelope makes a difference as to what you're eating, how you're moving, how active you can, you build upon yourself.
Right.
But sometimes things just sweep it out from underneath.
Exactly.
But thank you. I think that would be wonderful. Please keep me updated. I will also say I emailed Shawn as well, and he has a friend here who he wants to connect me with, who's a writer. And I'm just sort of recollecting how amazing it is that there are people who are really digging into their fields and really creating, like moving their needles forward.
Yeah.
And I think that will continue to amaze me, especially because, as I was saying before, like becoming valuable in academia is one thing. Making the divide. Like I love the cover that your publisher chose for your book.
Thank you.
Because things have to grab you. You have to have a good design choice. If you don't interpret the final message, a plan will stay on a shelf if the people don't connect with it.
You got it.
That can be really hard to understand because we often think, well, the work itself is good. Surely that will speak.
But that's not how it works. I mean, ironically, the saying, never judge a book by its cover, like applies to a lot of things, but it does not apply to books. Will you tell me about the cover? Like, will you tell me what struck you about it?
Let me pull it up. Too many windows.
You and me. Oh my God.
Reframing the American Dream. So, one thing I really appreciate, especially because we talk about, people think of the term tiny house has its own connotation to it. I loved that the little mini house is the American flag. I think it's undeniably clearly the American flag, so it really grabs your eye. It's inside of a frame of homes. So it's it's a good visual depiction of reframing an American dream, where the frame itself is just a basic flat frame. So it's a good contrast. I also like the topography of reframing the being aligned to the left, because the term, so you have this nice visual zigzag going on of your eye going from the top left down to the bottom right of the book's cover, which then leads to your names. So it's visually a good, it's a good visual. And I will say that I also understand that authors don't always have the opportunity to really make a dent in those decisions. So I appreciated that, especially the fact that there are lots of books. I mean, I went bonkers on my bibliography in my paper. There are a lot of books that focus on tiny housing as the accessible build it yourself model, or hire a builder to do, and that's great. But as you said, like, we have to make a case for the housing form.
Yep.
And for many folks, they're never going to consider it because they don't want to live in a small structure.
Right.
I understand. I have a lot of family heirlooms. I'm a maximalist, not a minimalist.
Me too. Me too.
So I understand, if I can have my own neck of the woods and have a big central patio in the middle of a few standalone buildings, that could be cool. My own little estate. But most people don't think like that. And so, I always say to people, like, it's only if you actually like the lifestyle. There's a company called Pallet that builds shelters, which are tiny homes they have, but they are meant. There's a place called Ann Street Village over in Salisbury, which is on the Eastern Shore, south. And our secretary at my job was the mayor of Salisbury. So
really?
he has seen, he's seen it, but he also understands that it's meant for those, homeless people and people at risk of housing instability who need to have a central case management setting where they can have something stable and warm and just theirs. But I've also seen those exact same homes online in another setting be heralded as like such a nice little spot. And it's like, it really just goes to show it's what the amenities are around it. So
exactly.
I guess, metaphorically, it's not just the fact that your little house on your cover is on its own. It's that it shows me the proximity of, little house in connection to all the other homes. I just think it's very good visuals.
I'm delighted. I'm going to tell you why I'm delighted. I mean, I'm delighted for so many reasons, but if I can tell you why this particularly delights me, I'm writing a bunch of notes because I cannot wait to tell Shawn.
Hi, Shawn. Hi.
Yeah. So, oh my gosh. Okay. You have no way of knowing this, but you just like sang a love song to my heart on this cover. So I will tell you the side story. So I designed the cover. And so thank you. And I fought like hell for it with the publishers. And they were pretty okay with some of the components, but you go back and forth, and you're supposed to like fill out this form of like, what images come to mind when you think of your book or whatever, right? And I was like, I'd already designed it basically on like a PowerPoint slide of what I wanted it to look like. And I was like, okay. And then I like went through and I like hyper explained it. And they kept saying, don't over explain it. We want our creative team to be able to do it. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. But also, creative team, here's information, right? And then they told us, like, they were asking us some questions back and forth, not the creative team, but they're like, just before we send this, because we only have one chance, like we only have one time with the creative team, and whatever they send back, that's what we have. And I'm like, what kind of nightmare is this?
Okay, when I don't want to do any more client work. I'm done with that side of my life. But when, like, you always offer revisions, and you also always offer options.
Yes, exactly. So
publishers.
I very much like, I work really hard to like, here's this example, and here are these book examples that I really like, and here's why, and so the design came back, and it was pretty much what you see now, which I was like, okay, good. But it was the tiny house and had an American flag in it, which again, I picked out the like this is the American flag I want, because I want a very classic, like when you said it's unmistakable that it's an American flag, it's a very clear American flag. I was just like, yes! Because the one they sent back was this terrible, like weird version of the American flag. And it was like a 90s version. And there was only one star you could see. And it was like sort of waving. And I'll have to find it and send it to you, because it is literally the ugliest fucking, thing I've ever seen. And we got it. And we're both just like, this is awful. And we were trying to figure out how to come back and be like, wow, this is really great. And here's what we love about it. But also this needs to change. And they came back when we did say that, they came back and said it would cost $400 if we wanted the creative team to look at it again. And that would come, we have to pay them, like, here's a check. And this is a great publisher working with, like, this is, like, it is.
But they're outsourcing the creative time, and they're being told, here's my hourly rate.
Right.
And you're like, I don't actually need your hourly rate. I can do the vector myself.
Oh my God, I will modify it for you. And so we had this big back and forth over it, and we decided to do it. But it was like, I was so embarrassed by the first cover. And my big thing was like, I would not feel confident posting this or sharing this, or like, this looks like a cheesy cover to me. And it is taken the power away from the American dream. Anyways, it turns out, sorry, that's not you, that's me. And anyways, we were like, okay, we're going to pay it would be $400 out of pocket. We'll just pay it because it's worth it. Right. And they came back and said, oh, the person who does the creative stuff said, oh, I already have that version done. And I just had to do this one small change. So because it was the reason they didn't want to do the American flag like you see there was because they thought the white was blending into the white background. And I was like, I said, well, can we make it just a little bit grainy around the edge? Or can we swap it so that I didn't want a black background with white houses because of the race components that could bring on. And,
yes.
Yeah. And I that was something I was really working hard against. And I thought the black houses then, like, it felt like a death. It felt like, wearing black for a funeral, because that's what's really happening, right? In terms of houses, and in our chapter, the collapse of houses and the lack of maintenance by governments. And anyway, so thank you so much. That was like the greatest gift I could ever receive, because I will find the other one and send it to you. It was so dumb. It looks so stupid. I hate it so much. Oh my God. So,
I've come to understand that a lot of people, they don't understand the impact of, you can't always use clip art. To, like, those details matter. The color scheme that you've got of the text underneath, like those types of things really grab the eye. And also, one thing I really enjoy about your choices with this cover is that it demonstrates, the end of your subtitle is structural equity. Well, this demonstrates that this is going to be a book that reads like a report on the system. And I knew this because I knew, when I had talked with Shawn way back when. But as you can tell from my overly enthusiastic bibliography, like, you read so many things, and they're either journals, which only academic people read, other people can't find them because of the internet as the way it's currently been designed, or they end up as books. And the challenge is having the energy later. Like, that's the reason why I told you about, I want to do my podcast, the Soulstrong podcast, is so that I can discuss sort of in all the ways that I see it, how you can take things you've worked on in the past, interview new people, expand upon what it is that you see and have created, and identify that there's more to just one story.
Amazing.
And that usually can't happen in a single medium. Like, what's really great about when I saw how many people you're working with on this, how many people you're drawing these connections, like you spoke about the environmentalism aspect. it's difficult to get actual developers to consider new materials when they haven't yet been beta tested. And the cost to get, I went to a facility,
Mm-hmm.
a testing facility, actually not far from my job over well, in this case, this spot was over in Anne Arundel County, but
Mm-hmm.
my job is in Prince George's usually. And I was amazed to find that there was this, this proper materials testing facility where they are really uh, describing what is the grade difference between this fire retardant and that fire retardant. This bathtub and that bathtub. This like
Mm-hmm.
the level of manufacturing needed for any industry to develop has so much specialization,
Yep.
and it's all mom and pop businesses.
Mm-hmm.
These big, huge conglomerates
Yep.
that are, with all their subsidiaries. So to understand that you have to make, dents on so many different levels.
Yeah.
And somebody has to say, oh, did you hear about this? Well, you don't hear about something unless it gets written up about.
Exactly. Exactly.
You know?
Unless people are talking about it. Yeah. Well, we're hoping with the book that the people will consider using it. I mean, there's lots of spaces I want it to be, but one of the spaces I would love it to be in the training level in terms of people who are like whether graduate or undergraduate level classes. We aimed for the book, and this is really Shawn because it was before I was on board. He wanted the writing to be accessible. He didn't want it to be academic. He wanted it to be that your average person could read it and understand it, like that has a, that has a background in anything to do with around housing. This one could pick it up and go through it. And I love that so much. But it's also it means that if we get it into a classroom on real estate business, let's say, which is what I'm right now trying to, like, if they read a couple of those chapters, right, then they're going to have a broader view outside of what their specific thing is. If it's in an architecture class, if it's in a, like getting into your program potentially that you graduated out of, right? Having these spaces where even if it's individual chapters, but if we can have it that even like 2 of the chapters, if not the whole book, is in that, like part of that curriculum, it means that those people who are working in housing can have this expanded view of what this could look like, and how it does look in these other places. We fought really hard to have, we wanted in each chapter for it to be like, Justin Fair, Michaela Howells, and then underneath of it, like what it is we are, right? So that it's, like that, it like, or like the other one we did, it was like an architect and anthropologist, like the pairing of what it is that we are. We have all sorts of different people with all sorts of backgrounds. And they said that the style, the way the book goes, the style and the way it's organized, they have it all at the end. And I think that makes it less powerful because I think it's important to have up at the forefront, like, this is what these people are, and here's who they are, and here's the skills they're bringing, and the perspective they're coming from. And I'm also someone who believes that you need to have that personal touch. Like, that's why it was very important to me that throughout the book I referred to as like, you did the work, you did the ethnographic work, you did that, like that is yours. And it's super critical to me that was clear, because one, that is your work, this extraordinary work you did. But also because it's like, this is the point of view that we're coming from. This is the perspective we're coming from. And that's helpful, I think.
I am very grateful. It really reveals to me how I take my own voice for granted sometimes, because I'm used to this. And I will also say, I'm biracial, as a mixed kid, light-skinned. I usually don't read as Black to people unless it's summertime or my hair is long.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you know, you don't know. So I was very grateful, both going to a HBCU, but also grateful to find a topic that I could relate to, that was about something that, continues to be my go-to on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
Something that allows me to highlight how cool and neat and wonderful, women like Dominique Moody are. Like there are so many people who are, I think, sort of, I think, undervalued culturally
Totally. Absolutely.
because, and usually I guess that's because, um, they're not necessarily like the most palatable. Like they're weirdos.
Hmm.
They are eclectic folks like myself.
Hmm.
They are bingo cards, as I like to refer to myself.
Oh, that's a good way of putting it. Like that. I'm going to steal that.
Uh, but the reality is that, like, people who go against the grain have a very important part in our society.
Absolutely.
The challenge is that so often they um, they don't have a filter or someone marketing. They don't have an agent. They don't have someone who makes more amenable things they might say, and then you end up with bad press, or the person just ends up living under a rock because they want to have a wonderful, nice private life.
Right.
And I will also say that was one thing I don't think I spoke about it in my paper, but I loved. I'm looking at Tia Simone Gardner's work, Jewel Pearson. These are women who often are, these are women who are, I would say, atypical in the fact that they are like owning their own voice.
Mm-hmm.
They have presences online. They are
Mm-hmm.
most of these types of people I interviewed are workaholics.
Mm-hmm.
There was one writer, one of my sources, who was like very much like, wow, I can't believe somebody read my work.
Wow.
And I think it was, let me go for.
I don't know, but I hope that they made it to the book chapter.
Yeah, I think it was Elaine Morin, I think is her name. Yeah, she did a really great job at just at expressing sufficient urban grain, was the term she used. Um, One of the things I recognized was, I'm citing people sight unseen. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
like this is someone from Calgary. Like, okay,
Right.
someone who I've randomly found whose words have spoken to me. And in some cases, as a student, I like my teachers are just giving us everything and saying, go and give me something back.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very grateful and proud that I was able to produce for my teachers something that I felt was like so resonant. And in my case, aside from the ethnographic work, I also have a design background. So when I did my like 5 or 6 proposals
Uh-huh.
where I was opining the order of which to
Mm-hmm.
introduce, maybe we can do a market rate village before we do ADUs, which
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's going to happen because of COVID. It was happening, and then COVID happened. Now it's
Mm-hmm.
on the
Yep.
planning phase. Uh, but I love that I was able to identify that, the trend in that regard. I was able to identify,
Yep.
like, I think this is the way that's going to make the most sense. And it's sort of happening. I can't take credit. It's not
Take
like
I grant you full credit. I grant you full
like
credit.
I
Yeah.
don't know that anyone at Baltimore City has opened up my book, but I do know my book, my thesis, which I guess I'll ask you after this. How do I get this thing published properly?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but it does show me that if you, as you were saying before, someone who clearly cares about a subject,
Mm-hmm.
like that's what's going to grab people. And I made a point with my advisor. I said, like, it's about the Black experience, in that I can only speak about my own experience, and I can only describe the needs that people have.
Mm-hmm.
This is not a story of people can read the Black Butterfly,
Mm-hmm.
and they can hear about the aggravating torture that is being trying to be housed while being black in uh, and disproportionately aggrieved. Uh, but at the same time, there are lots of people who don't have the experience who are black.
Nope.
That it's a caste issue in our country, not. not a race issue.
Exactly. Absolutely. It's a caste issue, and the race issue is impounded to be able to separate, like to stop the caste from coming together and engaging and pushing back.
Yeah,
And so race
I hadn't read Isabel Wilkerson until after the paper. But I really love, though, that, you know, we are all building upon each other's work, and I'm still meeting people, but it also reminds me that, you know, things don't happen in a bubble. So when I got your offer, and then when Shawn told me about this book, that is for me very meaningful. It reminds me that um, it's not just I did a work thing. I mean, I'm very grateful that I work in a field that is, you know, community development is a subset of urban planning. I was at the Department of Planning's office earlier today, but I usually don't get, you know, this is my fund. But if I had to work in planning all day, every day, I think I would go a bit mad.
Yes.
Because I can't handle straight up land use zoning talk, nor can I handle design talk all day.
Oh my God, can you imagine? This is why I'm not in administration. So Shawn's in administration, and I'm like, that just sounds nightmarish to me.
Well, I'm grateful that, especially with my work with the Community Development Block Grant team here, I'm able to put my technical writing and my policy awareness and my planning hats all together. But it's very much because my director, Cindy Stone, is so generous with me and allows me to, she's saying, like, this is really cool, I like what you're doing, but also it's an investment.
Good. I'm glad that they're recognizing that.
And, you know, I'm in the Baltimore office, which is only 10 minutes from my house, not an hour.
Nice.
So 3 days a week now. Hashem, not 5 days. I have to drive to Prince George's every day. But in doing so, it has reminded me how much there's a difference in a cost to people having to commute.
Huge difference.
And because I'm like literally tired so much of my day, and I tell people like, thank you, but like there's only so much I can. Like I stretch. Like I mean I can do better, but like I am in a good place physically, but I still deal. This is a nervous endocannabinoid system issue, not anything else. And the difference of me being able to be home within 20 minutes versus an hour and a half, it speaks miles to me, because my parents, and I believe I said this in my introduction, my parents were correctional officers, and they worked in a town called Jessup, which was about maybe 40, 50 minutes away from where I grew up. And, you know, my parents loved our house, and they liked the neighborhood, and they were never going to move, especially not to be closer to Jessup. But it has shown me that it really does make a difference as to the setting you set for your kids. Because, like, my parents, I mean, I took notes growing up. So when they said get a state job so you can be set, I said, you know, jump how high. But I've been very grateful to keep it and to have it, because when I started my grad school career, I was still in the nonprofit world, making $40,000 per year, not enough.
Nope.
And, you know, now to make about twice that, it's shown me, you know, I'm a homeowner now. My husband and I have been able to, we have two out of three, two cats, no longer three. Kitties, life. But it has shown me that we don't, you know, no one is alone. They are the result of what's been shown. And, you know, when I wrote my chapters on the, you know, the impact of the housing discrimination, part of me wishes I had spent more time on, you know, great Black fiction. I think I spoke to you about August Wilson's work in the Piano Hudson. You know, like but you know, it's a planning paper. I couldn't go full into.
And nothing we ever do is all the things. Like it never can be. And you and I think you and I may have similar brains where it's like, okay, but what about this great component? And it's like, and that's, I mean, I was joking with Shawn that it's ridiculous he didn't assign me because he asked me professionally if I'd consider working with your chapter because of my background with the NAACP, my background in housing, my background. I don't study housing professionally, right? I'm a human biologist. I study pregnancy and stress and pregnancy outcomes and how racism impacts that. But he invited me on those, and I was just like, it is hilarious that you're asking the gal with ADHD who has all the words in the world, and you're asking me to take whatever 150 pages, I can't remember how long your thesis was, and bring that down to a chapter. Like, it is absolutely, like, it is the funniest thing because I'm like, and reading your stuff, I'm like, I just want to add on to it, and then we have more, like we have it longer, and I think it worked out really well, and I'm really proud of it. And I just I'm really there's always the things, like you're saying, like there's always the things that you're like, oh, I wish I wrote about this or added this on or played with this idea. And but that's what the next project's for, right?
Yes. Well, that is the thing that, and I'm realizing we've been talking so long. I love talking. So
yeah, I love chatting as well. This is wonderful.
I've learned, and I'm going to send this to you, that my former professor, teacher, adjunct teacher, Lisa Hodges-Hinkin, I spoke with her before, back when you offered this to me, about how I could, parlay this and what do I want to do with this opportunity. Yeah. And she said to me, one, I want you to be on the housing committee for NAACP.
Yes.
She said, like, people will drain your energy. And you have to be able to sort of weather their storm, because you have your own life to live and your own relationships. Yep. And your own, capacity. Yep. That you have to protect when other people, you're dealing with their bullshit.
Yes, that is great advice.
You're dealing with their troubles. And so you can have something really great come along, and that's fantastic, and you should enjoy it. But understand that things are not crisp. Like, I was lucky. I've been very fortunate, Michaela, I went from many years at a job in community development on the nonprofit world with a great mentor. Now I'm in state government, and I have a great mentor, and I've been here for years. I have not had a jump, but lots of people have interruptions and starts and stops. They have to change entire careers.
Absolutely. Retool entirely.
Retooled entire sets of knowledge. Yep. And there's a reason why the NAACP and the city level gets broiled in lawsuits and advocating for for discrimination claims, because they can't fight all fronts.
Right, exactly.
And they have to pick what they do.
Right.
And so I have a friend who is a contrarian. I feel like that should be her actual job, but it's not. But I talk about her a lot now because she has been such a good rival and foil for me to remember that you can disagree with people and still love them. You can love people and still, they can be transient in your life. They can be permanent. They can be for the time being. However it all works, though, those relationships all mean that you have to manage your own and mitigate your own energy, because they disagree with you to such an extent because they haven't seen what you've seen, or they have seen and they believe that it means well. Like, I wish one thing I could put in my paper after is, like, best laid intentions, being Pollyanna. It's great to be idealistic.
Yep.
But if you don't address, and I do think I said it several times in the book, in my thesis, and I hope it's in your book, like, if people only give in to their idealism or their values, they won't realize how much they negate themselves.
Yep.
The term, I'm going to send you another I'm sending you a flurry of emails. So
oh my God, send away. I love it.
There's a philosopher, I'm going to mispronounce his name because I don't speak German or Dutch or whatever his name is. Einar Vernejet. Anyway, I'm going to send this to you and you can tell me how to pronounce this
I mean,
gentleman.
if I know how to myself.
Not
And I
sure
I come from a medical background, let's not forget, as a
So, but one thing I really appreciate, because I myself listen to Ryan Holiday and a number of other Stoics on the regular, there is a reality that a lot of people neutralize their own virtues. And they do that because it's the way to sort of understand what's going on in your own life compared to what you want it to be.
Yep.
Implicit versus explicit desires. And the challenge so often is that people are afraid to recognize it. So I like to say that I'm a moderate person. I know that I'm a bingo card of progressive liberal values, but the challenge is if you just poo-poo every idea, you don't get anywhere.
Yep. No, exactly.
So
no, exactly. It's
I
one
realize
of the,
this.
yeah, it's one of the things I love about being an anthropologist is that the ethos and the cornerstone for what, in terms of like contemporary anthropology stands for, is recognizing that our lived experience is not the lived experience of everybody, and that the lived experience is what really matters in terms of engaging with and understanding what's going on. How do we understand the patterns? How do we understand the outcomes? Right. And I love that my entire field and training is effectively one of, okay, so what am I not seeing because of my viewpoint? What am I not getting because of my viewpoint? And where's the connections and where are the differences, right? Where are the challenges and where does it construct together? I don't want to forget to say, because you said about the NAACP and brought that up, a couple things about that. I brought out, and I spoke for both of us, and I hope this is okay, in the acknowledgments. And I don't think any other chapter has acknowledgments, but to me it was really important to keep the acknowledgments in from your thesis and make sure that your parents had the shout out in there, because I think that it speaks to this connectivity that your work comes from and speaks from. And it also gave space to kind of give a background and grounding and lived experience from where both of us are coming from. Like, my parents had a real estate appraisal business out of their home, and that was moderately successful, and then sometimes not, and to points where we go bankrupt. That side, but it gives someone who's reading it, if a student's sitting there reading it, they can get a little bit of flavor of who the heck we are, right? But I also in there took the liberty of, in the thank yous, thanking our aunties and uncles in the NAACP. And I chose that language thoughtfully, because I said our brothers and sisters, right? But I wanted it to be like a bow down to our elders and a recognition of our elders, especially because they're the ones who have shouldered so much of this. And so I chose that. And also because I wanted it really clear that we're both manifestations of the NAACP's work.
Yes, and that's the thing. I would like to get more involved. There's not, to my knowledge, while the Jewish Baltimore world is investing in me and has my ear, and I'm trying to be a good board member of the Jewish Museum and be involved, partake and be involved. Black culture is multiple castes, so they're quite different. So I can advocate, but because I don't deal with the visual discrimination issues, it won't matter about my ancestry or the fact that my dad, looks the way he looked. How my family are. My family are living a different life than me because they deal with discrimination on the regular that I don't.
Right.
I think the joke was, if someone asks, what race are you? It's, well, what do you need me to be?
There you go. And it's interesting because I didn't know until we were talking today how you engaged with your identity and what that looks like, and how you engage everyday life, how people read you, and so it's interesting because for walking into it as a white woman and who doesn't live in Baltimore, you know, I would not question anyone for asking, like, okay, what the hell, white woman who doesn't live in Baltimore, why are you like, I mean, the people's faces when, like, I've told them I was writing a book here, they're like, oh, what's it on? And I told them, they're just like, what? Like, where did that come? Because I'm doing much different things in my community and spaces. But then also when I was talking about when I was working on the chapter, and they're like, well, what's that piece on? And I told them, and they're just like, you're writing about Black Baltimore. And it was so, I really appreciate my community, because my community multiple times, different spaces called me out or pushed a bit about, like, you're writing about Black Baltimore and you are not Black, nor are you from Baltimore. What's going on? And they said it nicer, right? But I'm so glad that they chose to do that, because they're like, nope, here's where this comes from. Here, and they're like, oh, okay, good. Like,
well, I think it's good to check oneself. It's also important to note, like, the point of your book is about recognizing problems in our society. So, like, you're going to talk about the history that literally happened about housing discrimination and, you know, the harms that came from systemic problems. You can also talk about, you know, the victories, but most of those victories didn't happen because of these problems. They happened because people moved elsewhere.
Exactly.
Or they stuck around and just pushed for what they believed in.
Precisely.
And the reality too is, you know, as you said before, like, we can make recommendations all we want.
Right.
Like, that's what I love about my tables, as you know, with, like, we can identify, well, this then lead to this. You know, how we can do this, then we can do this. But at the end of the day, like, what we're all really recognizing is that, like, we want to see something because of the problems. And there's no, you know, it doesn't help that, like, I wish that we had more parity homes, which is a women-owned building development, you know.
Absolutely.
I wish we had so many. I wish they give her money up the wazoo, give Baltimore Homes money up the wazoo. Like, I wish that these, you know, that this was the norm. But the reality is, like, when you look at Reverend Faith Fowler from Detroit, like, it was past, like, they didn't just happen overnight.
Nope.
People had to invest in them. They had to get a proof of concept. They had to develop. And those types of people don't just occur.
No.
And I'm really glad that, you know, that, you know, and you did reference in the manuscript you sent me, you did reference these people, because so often, you know, we can talk about features all we want, but at the end of the day, it's cool projects that make change.
Absolutely. Well, and then, but people knowing about the cool projects. That's why it's really important for me to keep in there's quotations we kept in there. Their language, I thought it was really compelling. But also, it's like, you know, I lean into Black feminist perspective, and, you know, I built that section out a bit because you talk about it throughout. It's very clear that you're coming from a Black feminist perspective throughout the whole piece, and it's like, let's bring that in, and so that we have this to really get at, and these different sort of versions, and, you know, Afrofuturism, and I love that you brought that up in your thesis. I was like, I was on a plane reading your thesis. Exactly. Yes. You know, because I'd written like Afrofuturism like pages earlier, and it was like, okay,
I love that. I mean, I knew when I started this, everything interested me, but what was really great was that I became the portal through to communicate these things.
Yeah,
like,
fantastic.
I myself am I am gay and I am half Black, but I am a man. I am not going to be able to speak on behalf of other minority groups.
Exactly.
I can only speak on behalf of my own experience, and so I was really glad to find. And, you know, there's in my work, there's I made a graph, because I'm a visual person, connecting how all of my my literature. I was like, no, these are the ones that are going to have to be referenced, and
Yep, totally.
I am going to stitch these together. And what I really appreciated was that it allowed me to highlight that there are really cool projects going on and cool people who are still around today,
Yeah.
doing cool stuff. And it was my goal as a planner to identify and hopefully, herald that these people exist, and a lot of them travel. Like Dominique Moody is an artist. People have friendships and family in DC, and then they go down to North Carolina, and then they we're East Coast people, and we know the difference between North versus South. We know what it's like to be around sundown towns and what it's not.
Yep.
But I guess I just want to conclude by saying that it's a recognition of I think the other people's work that was like a new thing for me. I've read other theses, and they weren't trying to create an argument. They were just accomplishing, a project, or they were just steering towards maybe this could work here.
Yes.
And I wanted to clearly identify, like, if the climate is ready, you find the right people in the mix. This is how we can push for more of this.
Yes.
And I will also say there's a book, Ross Chapin's Pocket Neighborhoods book, where it's a beautiful like visual book. It really highlights that like the more the merrier.
Yeah.
Like there's so many opportunities here, and here in Baltimore, like we have so many opportunities that is unique, I think, to our city that you won't, and the challenge is that people have to see it done elsewhere, often to adopt it here. So I want to send you that article a few weeks ago about Hope Village. I was that one, I was like, it's happening. It's happening.
It's happening. It's like being enacted. So I cannot agree more. I'm so excited. This is such a great combo. Thanks for spending so much time with me. Thanks for sharing. I'm so happy that you're overall happy with things. And I really look forward to me, this is the beginning and far from the end. I'm delighted for that. Okay, I will talk to you soon. Go get home. And thanks for spending so much time with me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye, Michaela.
Bye. I appreciate you.